Hey, good morning. My name is Amanda Rivera. The date is October 17th, 2024. This is an IPD amendment rezoning request for property that's just north of Alico Road. Because this is a quasi-judicial hearing, all evidence and testimony must be taken under oath. So if you intend to speak today, if you could please raise your hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony that you will provide is the truth?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Do we have members of public with us this morning? Thank you. Are you familiar with our process and how we go through things this morning? No. Okay, I'll just describe briefly for you then. First, we're going to hear from the applicant. They're going to present their request in the case and call any witnesses that they may have in support of that request. Following their presentation, then we're going to hear from the county staff, who will go through their review and recommendation in this case. They are recommending approval with conditions and one deviation. After that, we will come back to that's the public comment period after we hear from the public. So I will call forward the cards that I have at that time, and you can place any comments that you have in the record. There is only one opportunity to speak, but there is no time limitation to the time that you can offer your comments. Following that, we will come back to the applicant and the staff for their rebuttal and any closing comments that they may have. So with that, we can get started. Did the staff want to present your publication notice?
I do. Thank you for asking. This is the affidavit of publication in the news press for this hearing.
Okay, so that will be the Staff Exhibit 2. Staff Exhibit 1 was relabeled as the staff report. And with that, we can begin with the applicant whenever you're ready.
Good morning, Jennifer Fisher on behalf of the applicant, SWUSI LLC. I'd like to start this morning by introducing our team and then introducing the request. So to start with our team, the manager of SWUSI LLC is Mr. Richard Cowart. He is the owner and the principal behind the company. Today we have with us Mr. Max Malloy as his representative if there's any questions. I am the land use attorney. Our land use planner is Mr. Tom I just messed it up. I practiced this morning. It's Sikarsky. I apologize. With RVI Planning. The civil engineer is Mr. Carl Baracco Jr. of Baracco & Associates. The transportation engineer is Yuri Baikow of TR Transportation. And the environmental expert is Bridget Terrio of Passerella & Associates. My understanding is that Mr. Sikarsky, Mr. Baracco, and Mr. Baikow have presented before the HEX many times. Do you need any additional information to qualify them as experts?
No, thank you.
Okay. For Ms. Terrio, this is her first time. I do have a copy of her resume. Okay, may I present that to you?
Yes, and that's the same that was presented. I'll accept it as well. Thank you. And the applicant's 48-hour, and that will be applicant exhibit 1. And just for housekeeping, we did receive a revised 48-hour letter. So we've got applicant exhibit A being the initial 48-hour notice, and then applicant exhibit B was the second 48-hour notice. And I believe there was subsequently a revised second 48-hour notice. So we've got applicant A, B, and C covered there, and then applicant exhibit 1 will be this resume. Thank you. Did you want to establish her as an expert at the time of her testimony?
Sure, that would be wonderful.
Thank you.
So we'll go ahead and do that then. And so with that, I will go ahead and turn to the request before you today. Oops. There's our list of the team. And the request is the applicant is requesting approval to amend the Industrial Plan Development Zoning District approved pursuant to resolution number Z90043 to allow for the following: the modified schedule of uses, a schedule of deviations, a site development regulations, and an updated master concept plan. And with that, to get into the body of the case, I'd like to go ahead and turn it over to Mr. Sikarsky.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. For the record, Tom Sikarsky, certified planner with RVI Planning and Landscape Architecture. The property is located at 16351 Old US 41, west of Michael F. Rip Parkway, approximately 3.5 miles west of I-75 and Old US 41, and as you mentioned, north of Alico Road. The property is located in the Gateway Airport Planning Community and located on a major industrial corridor. The property is located next to similar industrial uses, being a recycling center, vehicle repair shop, construction company, and is currently zoned IPD. This, I believe, was originally zoned IPD in the 90s, but the IPD had a very specific schedule of uses and site plan, so this is just to broaden the allowed uses on the site and make more of a standard concept plan that would allow for the flexibility of different uses. The future land use is industrial development and wetlands. Zoning map showing it is currently zoned IPD and confirming the industrial development future land use, with wetlands being in the corner here in the future land use. This is the concept plan that we're presenting. There's a type B buffer located along the front and the rear of the property. No buffer to the adjacent uses, being industrial. And there is 1.69 acres of open space required. We are providing 3.10 acres of open space with our planned buildings around the perimeter of the site, and parking and open storage space at the center of the site, and a 25-foot buffer or setback along the exterior of the property. For compatibility, this is similar industrial uses surrounding the property, similar to what the property currently is, just as I mentioned, expanding the uses, a type B buffer to the front and rear property, and as I mentioned, the 25-foot perimeter setback from the PD boundary. For deviations, we have one deviation that we're requesting at the front. It's a request to allow for a separation of 43 feet between driveways that creates a connection separation on Old US 41. For justification, the subject property only has a 70-foot street frontage on Old US 41, so there's insufficient frontage to provide that separation of 60 feet. And this request has received no objection from all applicable agencies. For utilities and stormwater, I'd like to defer to our engineer, Carl Baracco Jr.
Morning.
Good morning, Madam Hearing Examiner. For the record, Carl Baracco Jr. I'm Vice President at Baracco & Associates and also a registered professional engineer in the state of Florida. So to address the utility portion of this project, there is currently central potable water to the project, but the project does not currently have central sanitary sewer. When the applicant does move forward with the development order, we will look to see if there is centralized sanitary sewer. If there is, we'll make a connection to that. If not, the next step would be to permit a septic system through the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. So when we get to that portion or that part of the development process, we will look at those options and select what we think is best for the project. With the stormwater management, the system will be designed in accordance with all local, state, and federal criteria. To give you an idea of how we plan to design this, so we will keep all the stormwater runoff contained within the site, and you can see some of the flow arrows that we have posted on the site plan that will either via open swale or hard pipe drainage conveyance all the runoff back to the approximate 1.4 acre water management system to the north of the property. You can see here we have the outfall where the treated runoff will be discharged to a canal that in Lee County GIS is not named, but that canal does run to the west and tie into the 10-mile canal system. From 10-mile canal, it does discharge into Estero Bay. It's a pretty simple system. The new water quality standards will be provided through the modernized water management system. So,
Will you need an ERP for this?
yes, ma'am, we will.
Okay. And so the water quality concerns that were raised in the staff report, there's a county condition, but those will also be conditioned through the ERP as well, through the water?
Yes, ma'am, and they'll be designed with the new Clean Water Act standards that were recently adopted by the state. So that concludes my portion of the presentation. I will hand it over to Bridget with Passarella for the environmental portion.
Good morning.
All right, so to go ahead and go through Ms. Terrio's background, can you go ahead and explain your educational background?
Absolutely. So I received my Bachelor's of Science in Biology from Florida Southern College back in 2016, followed by my Master's of Science in Marine Science from Jacksonville University in 2018. While in graduate school, I worked with the Florida Department of Environmental Protection in the Compliance and Permitting Department for the Environmental Resource Permitting, or Program, excuse me. And then after the successful defense of my master's thesis, I refined my skills into the field of environmental consulting, where I've worked with Passarella and Associates for about 6 years now.
Can you give us an overview or summary of your experience?
Absolutely. So as an ecologist, I perform a variety of field and office tasks, including habitat mapping, wetland delineations, protected species surveys and relocations, local, state, and federal environmental permitting, biological assessments, just to name a few. Specific to Lee County and the Lee Plan, I have worked on multiple zoning applications, all with various levels of environmental concerns. I've also assisted in comp plan amendments as well as development orders, and I am a certified professional wetland scientist.
All right, Madam Humier, do you have any other questions that you'd like to hear? Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for touching on the Lee County specific. That's one that folks tend to miss.
Okay,
Absolutely.
great. And I'd like to go ahead and tender Ms. Terrio as an expert in this case. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So as previously mentioned, excuse me, the project site totals approximately 8.46 acres. It is located just north of Old US 41. Passarella did delineate the land use features and habitat types back in September of 2023, utilizing the Florida Land Use Cover and Forms Classification System, also known as FLUX. The dominant land uses on the project included disturbed land, spoil areas, and berms. There are no wetlands located on the project site. We have applied for a formal wetland jurisdiction determination with the South Florida Water Management District. And as part of that process, we had a site review with district staff back in August, where they did confirm that no wetlands were present on site. In terms of other surface waters, when we originally delineated the project back in 2023, we had mapped out approximately 0.18 acres of surface waters, which constituted very shallow man-made ditches. However, during the site review with district staff, we kind of took a more in-detailed look at these areas, and district staff recommended that we remove these land use features simply because they just did not believe that they constituted proper surface waters. So per the formal determination, the entire 8.46 acres is entirely consisted of uplands. We are expecting to receive that permit in the next week or two, of which case we will certainly provide it to county staff at that time. And in terms of protected species, we conducted a protected species survey on the site back in September of 2023, and no listed wildlife or plant species were noted on site. And that's all I have for this one.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good morning.
Good morning. For the record, Yuri Baika with TR Transportation Consultants. I've been sworn in and previously accepted as an expert in transportation planning. I'll briefly go over some of the transportation aspects of this project. We prepared a traffic study for this rezoning application based on 152,000 square feet and 152,460 square feet of uses. As part of our traffic study, we first prepared our typical trip generation analysis consistent with the latest IT trip generation manual. As part of our analysis, we reviewed the proposed schedule of uses, and we made sure we're utilizing the highest and traffic generating use we can think of from the schedule of uses. We then took the trips and added them to surrounding roadway network and conducted our typical link level service analysis, which included Alica Road, east and west of Old US 41. And the results of our level of service analysis indicated Alica Road to operate acceptable level of service C, both with and without the project traffic under the future build-out traffic conditions. As part of our traffic study, we also analyzed the proposed access driveway on the Old US 41, and the results of that analysis indicate acceptable level of service and that access point to operate with minimal delays. And that's all we had to prepare at this time for this rezoning application. We still have to go through the development order process. That's when we'll do another traffic study. It'll be much more detailed. It will look at site-related improvements, such as the need for turn lanes, etc. And the staff has reviewed our traffic report and also concluded that this will not have a detrimental impact on the surrounding roadway system. And so in my professional opinion, this project is consistent with the transportation element of the LEED plan and the Land Development Code. And that's pretty much it. Do you have any questions?
I believe warehousing was the use that you chose. Is that
Yes.
correct? And that is the highest traffic generating use of the entirety of the schedule of uses?
Yes.
That's
Yep.
proposed? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Right, next, we want to outline the consistency with the Lee County Comprehensive Plan. Staff finds that the request is consistent with the Lee Plan's policies, goals, objectives, and standards. We'll just go over a couple of them. Policy 1.1.7 outlines industrial development future land use category and the uses within that, and this is in compliance with that. Development location and timing, objective 2.1 and 2.2. Staff found that it is consistent with that as well. Water and sewer, as our engineer outlined, we will be connecting to county sewer.
I'm sorry, county water, correct?
County water, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sewer is going to be determined based on the generation of the flows.
Correct, correct. Policy 7.1.3, located in an appropriate area. This is an area with similar industrial uses. And for surface waters and surface water monitoring data, we are also in compliance with 125.1.2 and 125.1.4. For the decision-making criteria, staff finds that the request complies with LDC 34.145D4 A1 and A2. We are compatible with the existing planned uses in the surrounding area as well as the other regulations. In conclusion, staff did recommend approval of our application, and the applicant is in agreement with the staff report and conditions outlined in the staff report. The request supports the goals, objectives, and policies of the Lee County Comprehensive Plan and is consistent with the LDC. We are compatible with the surrounding land use pattern, mostly being industrial uses on Old US 41, and we request recommendation of approval for the proposed, it should be industrial plan development, sorry for the typo. Any questions for us?
I have a few, actually. So what is the existing, the use just says it's open storage, but was the incinerator use that was approved ever actually constructed and in operation on the site?
It was not, to my knowledge. It was a approved plan development. It was supposed to be for plant materials, specifically the old IPD outlined it for plant materials and similar vegetation incineration.
Okay, so it's basically just been historically used even since the 1990 approval as open storage of, it was hard for me, I did a site visit, but as you know from the street, it's not incredibly easy to see exactly what goes all the way back. So is it machinery that's being stored on the site? Is it building materials? Do we know?
I defer to,
Mr. Malloy?
yes.
And I don't know, I have a few questions, so let me ask them and then you can direct whoever needs to answer them. So what are the intended uses of the site then? 'Cause we've got 4 buildings that we're putting on here now. Do we know what they're going to be used as?
We situated the current concept plan to allow for flexibility. We don't know the exact end use, but the way the concept plan is set up, it allows for the flexibility as the property is developed with the schedule of uses that we outlined.
Okay, and do we know under the 1990 approval, what was the intensity? And I don't know if you're intending for this to be final with HEX or if you're intending to go to the board or not, but that whole question of whether you're increasing the intensity of what the approval is difficult to gauge in this situation because I couldn't find a square footage aside from the ancillary office and the 1990 approval being limited to 2,500 square feet. There was no mention that I could find of any intensity of square footage or a floor area ratio or anything of that nature, which made sense given the use that it was approving. But that incinerator use also, can you clarify the schedule of uses for me? Because there was repeated reference in the materials that was being removed, but it's still appearing under the salvage and disposal of materials use. So is that intended to stay on the schedule of uses?
That there will be the flexibility to allow that. The narrative specifically was outlining that that's being removed as the sole use for the property. The uses are being expanded to allow for flexibility. And you're correct that the previous zoning approval wasn't very specific. We based, as Mr. Bykow presented, the square footage off pretty much the maximum that would be allowed on the site for any use for traffic, and as we were considering this for approval. But the previous approval was not specific as to the intensity overall.
Okay, so when you developed the site plan, it was looking at what the maximum trip generation was gonna be based on the warehousing use, and then you stayed within the footprint of whatever square footage
Correct.
that number
Correct.
produced.
And for the concept plan, we really allowed, with the building situated around the perimeter, if there's any changes to the concept plan, it was designed so that it wouldn't trigger any sort of additional public hearing if there does need to be some flexibility in the concept plan itself.
Well, that's the question. The schedule of uses, it's 2 pages, let's say, so it's extensive, and so the concept plan that was proposed is rather specific, and so there wasn't alternatives to that concept plan, so that, again, is my question of just if you had a specific development order in mind that you were already looking at end users?
We do not, and the concept plan was also designed in a way where the majority of activity on the site would take place towards the center, with the buildings along the outside to help buffer from any other uses. And as we went through the schedule of uses, we tried to eliminate any of the more hazardous or intense uses. And any uses that are a little more intense, it's limited to indoor only.
Okay. And there was that mention in the narrative that applicant provided that supplemental setbacks for intensive industrial uses would be exceeded, but there was no condition requiring that. So is there a specific intent that you would exceed those standards? Because you referenced 3424-43 saying that they would be exceeded, but I didn't know if that was, it's not reflected obviously in the master concept plan because you're not proposing those more intense industrial uses. So I don't know if there was any discussion with staff about tying that to a condition if you had a specific supplemental exceedance that you were expecting?
There was not a specific discussion.
Okay. And then with the wetlands designation, there was testimony that you've already got the jurisdictional determination that there are no wetlands. So is there going to be a map amendment that you'll be pursuing to remove that designation from the site? Or you're just going to be operating within it?
I believe in conversations with staff, it was determined we wouldn't have to do a map amendment per se for it since it's so specific. And the JD would help serve the purpose of allowing for the use there.
Okay, and I can ask staff as well, but it's not, you're basically just going to rely on 1.51 tying back to 124 to say that you're not going to impact whatever development is within the uplands of the wetlands since they're not jurisdictional
Correct.
wetlands. Okay. Yes, I think that, the coastal high hazard area. There was mention that it's in the coastal high hazard area, but there was no discussion by staff or applicant of 101 or any of those policies.
There wasn't, no.
Okay, so I'll just need that as something supplemental unless you've got anything prepared that you wanted to put on the record today. Typically, there's conditions that we've been seeing in recent approvals if you're developing within the coastal high that basically just reiterates what some of the aims are to protect development in that area. They're standardized, and I can think of a number of them recently, so that might be something that needs to be included, so I'll just leave the record open for you guys to discuss that if we need to after the fact.
Understood.
Okay. That was the extent of my question, so again, if you don't have specific answers beyond what you've given here, then I'll just direct them to staff as well, and then we can reconvene after. Thank you. Was that everything from the applicant?
Housekeeping matter.
Yes.
I have a copy of the PowerPoint and a copy of the site plan that I'd like to go ahead and submit into the record.
Okay, thank you. So I'll do the PowerPoint, will be applicant exhibit 2. And then the master concept plan that you're submitting there, is it just an enlarged version of what's in the staff report? Okay, thank you so much. All right, so that will be 2 is the PowerPoint, 3 is the site plan. Thank you.
And that will conclude the applicant's initial presentation.
Thank you very much. I'm ready for staff whenever you're ready, Mary Sue. Good morning.
Good morning, Madam Hearing Examiner. For the record, I'm Mary Sue Groth, a senior planner with the Department of Community Development Zoning Section. I've previously been qualified as an expert witness in land use planning, the Lee County Land Development Code, and the Comprehensive Plan. I'd like to ask to do so again today.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. I do have a copy of my PowerPoint presentation for you if I can approach.
Thank you. That'll be staff exhibit 3. Thank you.
Okay, I'll start with the request and recommendation. RVI Planning and Landscape Architecture on behalf of the owner, SWUSI LLC, has filed an application to amend the construction burning IPD initially approved by Resolution Z90-043 to modify the schedule of uses, the schedule of deviations, and the site development regulations. The proposed maximum development density intensity is 152,460 square feet, and the applicant has requested one deviation from land development code requirements related to connection separation. Staff has recommended approval of the request with conditions. Some background on the property. Again, the subject is property is located at 16351 Old US 41. It is south of Briarcliff Road and north of Alico Road and consists of one strap number and is within the industrial development and wetlands future land use categories and the coastal high hazard as established by Lee County Comprehensive Plan. And the property is zoned IPD. Approximately 9.11 acres of land, including the subject property, were rezoned from light industrial to industrial plan development by Resolution Z90-043 to permit an incineration use and ancillary office not to exceed 35 feet above average grade. The approved schedule of uses also included open storage of the vegetation to be incinerated, and the subject property has a gravel driveway and is currently used for outdoor storage of materials. To the north of the subject property, across Michael G. Ripa Parkway, are conventionally zoned Ag 2 properties, and to the east, light industrial. Properties to the south of the subject property across Old US 41 are a mix of light industrial and Ag 2, and to the west are light industrial zone districts as well. So covering LDC section 34-145, the following slides will demonstrate how the applicant has met the listed criteria for the hearing examiner to approve the request. Starting with Lee Plan analysis, Lee Plan policy 1.1.7 and 1.5.1 for the industrial development and wetlands future land use. Again, the parcel is located in the industrial development and wetlands future land use. The industrial development future land use category is described by policy 1.1.7 as areas characterized by the special locational requirements needed to support industrial uses. As part of the future urban and suburban areas pursuant to Objective 1.1, the project site is in a designated area for varying intensities that provide for a full range of urban activity. Industrial uses are permitted in the industrial development future land use category, and the proposed amendment to the IPD to allow additional industrial uses is consistent with this objective. The future land use map does indicate some areas of wetlands on the subject property. Permitted uses in wetland future land use categories per policy 1.5.1 consist of just very low density residential and recreational uses that won't adversely affect the ecological function of wetlands. The applicant provided a protected species and environmental report indicating no on-site jurisdictional wetlands exist on the property. County environmental staff have included a condition that additional information at time of development order will be required to ensure those wetland impacts are mitigated via the state of Florida requirements. The condition also read that the construction may not commence until that issuance of the required permits. For Objective 2.1 of the Lee Plan, this promotes continuous and compact growth to contain any urban sprawl. The proposed amendment will allow development of an infill project in an area along Old US 41 where industrial development is encouraged. Proposed amendment will allow for clustered development patterns in an area with existing roadways and allowable industrial uses. Objective 2.2 and Policy 2.2.1 discuss new growth in future urban areas where adequate public facilities exist. The property is located within an existing IPD and lies along the county-maintained local road of Old US 41, and existing infrastructure of water and sewer is in place, and utilities are available to the site. Adequate public facilities, including fire, EMS, and solid waste, also serve the property. The applicant has provided a letter of availability from the Lee County Utilities stating potable water and sanitary sewer lines are in operation adjacent to the property and that there is sufficient capacity. Goal 7 of the Lee Plan covers industrial land uses, and this Lee Plan promotes opportunities for well-planned industrial development at suitable locations within the county. The proposed development is adjacent to existing industrial developments and resides within the industrial development future land use category. The proposed amendment will align this property with uses consistent with industrial development. In compliance with Policy 7.1.1, factors applicable to development and rezoning standards, development of the property will adhere to the LDC and other applicable regulations. The proposed amendment affects property in close proximity to established major roadways of Old US 41 and Michael G. Ripa Parkway. Lee County Utilities offers existing potable water and sanitary sewer. Policy 7.1.2 encourages industrial development in the industrial development future land use. Pursuant to Policy 7.1.3, the site is strategically located in an area that incentivizes industrial development with existing roadway infrastructure and utility capacity. The project, again, is an existing IPD with available services fulfilling Policy 7.1.4, and the property is centralized within the industrial development future land use category with the most intensive industrial uses permitted by the LDC fulfilling Policy 7.1.5. The property does not abut a residential use, so therefore no screening or buffering will be required as per Policy 7.1.6 and 7.1.7. Pursuant to Policy 60.1.1, the applicant has acknowledged that surface water management systems will be designed to protect or enhance the groundwater, on-site wetlands, and take into account the site's close proximity to the 10-mile canal. Policy 61.1.6 states that when and where available, reuse water should be the first option for meeting irrigation. The applicant has indicated the site development will prioritize the reuse of water if available at time of development order, but that due to the industrial nature of the property, irrigation will be a low demand. The amended schedule of uses eliminates many of the most hazardous materials used that would typically be allowable in the IPD zoning districts to prevent those environmental impacts on the surrounding properties. The applicant has indicated that any end development will take precautions to prevent hazardous materials from making contact with the environment, which does fulfill Objective 69.3 for hazardous materials. The applicant indicated that the site design will ensure that pretreatment of stormwater prior to discharge will be in accordance with state regulations pursuant to Policy 125.1.2. And an environmental resource permit will be obtained from South Florida Water Management District prior to construction. And the applicant stated continuing monitoring will be completed to ensure proper discharge from the site. Lee County Natural Resources staff have provided a staff report implementing additional conditions for a water quality monitoring program fulfilling policies 126.1.3 and 126.1.4. Goal 127 for air quality is to ensure the best possible air quality, meeting or exceeding state and federal air quality standards. The schedule of uses, again, was revised to remove many of the most intense uses, and the proposed development will comply with all local, state, and federal governmental requirements, and an FDE permit must be obtained for any intensive industrial uses. For meeting the code and other applicable county regulations, the applicant has acknowledged that at the time of development, compliance with LDC and other applicable county regulations will be required. The applicant has requested and justified one deviation for the planned development. pertaining to connection separation. This is in addition to one previous deviation approved by Resolution Z90-043 for minimum lot width for an industrial use, which has been withdrawn with this application. As the applicant has stated already, Deviation 2 seeks relief from LDC Section 10-285A, which requires a minimum connection separation of 60 feet between driveways on urban local roadways to allow a minimum connection separation of 43 feet. And staff and Lee County Department of Transportation have provided traffic-related analysis supporting that application, the applicant's justification, and has recommended approval of the deviation. Proposed amendment will allow for development of an infill project, as we've covered. As previously mentioned, the subject property is part of an existing IPD and lies within the industrial development future land use category. Surrounding uses include a variety of industrial uses, and the proposed amendment adds a mix of industrial uses that will be consistent and compatible with surrounding properties.
On that for a moment, I didn't see anything in the materials, and I don't know if you evaluated. There's an MPD application that was heard just a few weeks ago, and I don't know if any analysis was done with respect to that project as well.
No.
It hasn't been approved yet, but it was I think it was a former DRI. It wasn't my case.
Okay.
But I remember seeing it, and it's directly across the street to the south, but it has residential components to it as proposed, and
okay.
maybe a hotel or something,
All right.
I recall, but that wasn't looked at when staff reviewed for.
No, it wasn't. I can go back and look at it and
Okay, thank you.
take a look, yeah. The proposed amendment to the IPD requests a deviation to memorialize a connection separation of less than the required 60 feet, which will be sufficient to serve the single-use industrial site. And Old US 41 is a two-lane local road that serves as an access street for the surrounding industrial site. The site has one existing means of ingress and egress and has been approved by the San Carlos Fire Protection and Rescue Service District and the Lee County Public Safety. The area has been reserved for industrial and mixed-use development focused on non-residential uses, and an existing IPD is already approved for this site. Applicant has demonstrated through the traffic impact statement that the surrounding roadway network can accommodate for the proposed development. I believe TR Transportation covered that well, so I won't belabor the level of service too much on that. But at time of development order, the proposed development will be reviewed again to determine the required site-related traffic improvements. The applicant submitted an environmental report indicating most of the site consists of non-indigenous habitat consisting of berms, spoil areas, ditches, and disturbed land. As we've established, the north portion of the site is within that wetlands future land use category. Applicant has not been issued a formal jurisdictional wetland determination as of the time of the staff report, or a South Florida Water Management environmental resource permit. All development in wetlands must be consistent with Goal 124, which states an applicant must demonstrate what type of mitigation measures will be required by the state to impact the state wetlands. Environmental staff have recommended in a condition that at time of DO, construction may not commence until the issuance of those required permits. As part of the site inspection that leads to the habitat flux map that Bridget shared with us, the site is surveyed for protected species. Site consisted of some disturbed habitat that may support burrowing owls and gopher tortoises. The applicant states that no protected species or evidence of protected species were observed, though, on the site. In addition, county environmental staff provided a report analyzing the request and found that the open space, for open space, the project meets the large project definition, and LDC Section 10-415A requires that they provide 20% open space for large industrial developments. The total open space required would be 1.69 acres, and as we know, the applicant is providing above that with 3.1 acres. So staff has recommended this be conditioned to ensure that 3.10 acres is provided. For indigenous open space preservation, the LDC requires large projects to provide 50% of the required open space through indigenous vegetation. The site does not have any major native plant communities, therefore no indigenous open space will be required. In addition, for buffers, the applicant is proposing an industrial use that includes open storage. Specific types of uses, including open storage, are required to provide enhanced buffers. LDC section 34-3005B1 requires a 6-foot screening when visible from street right-of-ways, and the property abuts Old US 41 along the west property line and Michael G. Ripa Parkway along the east property line, with the storage visible from both rights-of-way. Therefore, the applicant must screen the open storage area and provide a type D right-of-way buffer that is 15 feet wide with 5 trees per 100 linear feet and a double hedge row. The double hedge row must be 6 feet in height at time of development, or the applicant must provide a 6-foot high fence. In addition, the applicant is depicting a type B buffer located in a 10-foot wide drainage and utility easement, and LDC section 10421A5 states no required landscaping may be in a drainage or utility easement. So LDC section 10-421A2 also requires a minimum width of 5 feet for buffers. So the applicant will need to revise the master concept plan to depict the code required buffers. Staff has recommended a condition for that type D buffer too. For general trees, the applicant will be required to provide per LDC section 10-416A, 1 tree per 3,500 square feet of development area. And the applicant will be required to demonstrate on the development order the location of the 109 general trees calculated at the 381,150 square foot divided by the 3,500. To ensure the general trees have enough area to grow without being impacted by the use of the property, staff has recommended a condition to require the general trees be installed around the surface water management lake.
Has the need for the updated master concept plan been discussed with the applicant?
It was in the staff report, but we didn't bring it up again in the 48-hour letter, so. In addition, Lee County Natural Resources analyzed the request. Concerning discharge, the subject property's proposed development storm water runoff, as Mr. Bracco conveyed, the stormwater runoff will be directed to on-site retention and/or detention areas prior to discharging off-site into the Briar Cliff Canal. I know we had a difficult time as well. Briar Cliff Canal is right above the subject property there. That's what it's called. It's called a couple different things as well, but that's what we call it here. And it is adjacent to the north and located within the FDEP water body ID 10 Mile Canal. Further downstream water bodies, including Mullock Creek. This is Mullock Creek right here, so 10 Mile discharges into Mullock Creek, and then eventually they all flush out into Estero Bay. Staff's opinion, because these are all impaired water bodies already, staff's opinion is that many of the new proposed uses have the potential to degrade existing water quality below the state and federal water quality standards. So Natural Resources staff have recommended additional conditions be required for the water quality monitoring. As we've already discussed, a large portion of the parcel is located in the industrial development future land use category, and the property is served by Lee County Utilities, San Carlos Park Fire and EMS District Station 52, the South District Lee County Sheriff, and the Lee Tran Bus Route 140 stop 3133. So in conclusion, the request to amend the schedule of uses, schedule of deviations, and site development regulations are consistent with the Lee Plan and Land Development Code. The proposed amendment remains consistent with the existing industrial plan development and surrounding industrial uses. And staff has concluded that the amendment will not result in negative impacts to urban services, infrastructure, or surrounding properties. The subject property is sufficiently served by urban services, and the request will not impact any wetland preserves, flood hazard areas, or adversely affect environmentally critical or sensitive areas. And the amendment allows for support of mixed industrial uses and is appropriate for the location. And the established IPD and proposed request contains sufficient safeguards to the public interest. The one additional deviation being requested from Land Development Code and one existing deviation being withdrawn. Therefore, staff does recommend approval of the applicant's request with conditions. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Okay, so with that, we will open public comment. I've only got one card here, so it's for James Farwell. If you'd like to come forward and put your comments on the record, sir.
I don't have anything to say.
Okay.
I'm supportive.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we'll come back to the applicant and the staff. So the questions that I had note of then, I didn't ask because I didn't realize there was need to update the master concept plan. Is that something applicant was aware of and willing to do, or does additional discussion need to be had about that?
Carl, is that something that?
We can make the changes that are requested, yes.
Just to be clear, what are the changes that are requesting? It's to the buffer?
There's a buffer.
Is it on the
that's-
eastern side?
Yeah, it's on the eastern and western side.
So the western is clear because it's the right-of-way buffer, correct?
Right.
Is the code interpretation on the eastern buffer then? Because it's separated from Michael G. Ritt by the canal and the railroad,
Let me go back and look at what staff said.
I believe. That wasn't something that I caught when I was going through the materials, that was being required.
Says, in addition, the applicant is depicting a type B buffer located in a 10-foot wide drainage and utility easement.
Okay, so it's an easement issue, it's
Yeah.
not the, okay. So if that's something that the applicant is willing to do, we don't need to have additional discussion on that? Okay. So the only other outstanding issue then that I needed was some analysis on the coastal high hazard and then a condition if that's warranted, if staff feels that that's necessary and applicant agrees. So I can leave the record open to address both of those issues, the master concept plan and the coastal high hazard issue. And then the last question again was just, I guess, the intention. I feel this needs to go to the board for final hearing. If it was something that you were expecting to be final with me and there's some time sensitivity, then I can certainly try to accommodate that and get this out as quickly as I can so that you get scheduled before the board. If you need that, I want to offer it. But otherwise, I'll issue the recommendation and then you'll receive that before it goes to final hearing. So how much time do we think we need for the record to be open to make the changes?
How much time do you think you'll need?
I can make the changes to the master concept plan within early next week. I can have those done.
Tom, how about you, as we do our coastal high hazard analysis, do you want, what's your caseload like, coming back from a hurricane?
Yeah, I think within the next week.
Next
works.
week?
Yeah.
Okay.
So let's do the end of next week, which would be the 25th, if that works for everyone, by end of business. If there's additional time that's needed, certainly just let me know that and I can grant that. And if you could, just get with staff and applicant both to review whatever it is, and if there is a condition that's going to be recommended, if you can provide that to me as well so that I have that. Otherwise, I believe I had, I asked the questions as I went through them. Let me make one final check. Okay. So yes, okay, so with that, then we will conclude for today. And sir, since you were here, you will receive a copy of my recommendation once it's released, as well as the date that it'll go to the board. But since you didn't speak today, you would not be permitted to speak at the board hearing, but you certainly are welcome to attend that. Otherwise, thank you everyone for coming today. Thank you for your time. Please stay safe and stay well. Thank you.